Just briefly want to go over some of the safety considerations to keep in mind during an electrosurgical procedure. In electrosurgery, you're using the equipment to induce high temperatures, to pass direct current through the area in order to remove tissue, coagulate the blood, these sorts of things. And there are certain outcomes that you want to occur and to be thinking of prior to the procedure in order that there would be safety observed throughout and a positive outcome on the other side. And so we just want to briefly go over those that are on the board behind me here when we think about proper safety and outcomes related to electrosurgery. So the beginning one is hemostasis. We want to make sure that hemostasis is produced and maintained throughout the procedure, that there's never a problem in that regard. So hemostasis is achieved and maintained throughout the entire procedure is one of the outcomes that you want to try to ensure during electrosurgery. The second one is burn-free skin, that there would be, the patient's skin would remain burn-free from secondary areas related to use of the electrosurgical unit that don't include the direct surgical site. So you're thinking of, well, we knew we're going to use the electrical surgical device here, but we don't want to produce any sort of skin burns anywhere else outside of the site where it's going to be used. Next, there should be no injury to the patient due to insulation failure, direct coupling, or capacitive coupling. So you need to plan ahead for that. Where's the device in relation to the patient? Is there any danger from insulation failure and therefore a burn coming to the patient, direct coupling or capacitive coupling that would once again cause some sort of injury to the patient during the electrosurgery? And fourth, under safety outcomes in electrosurgery, no excessive coagulation tissue. If there is excessive coagulation tissue that remains, and one of the things electrosurgery is good at is removing excessive coagulation tissue, if that remains, you get improper wound healing, and you certainly don't want that. So one of the projected safety outcomes is to make sure there is not excessive coagulation tissue. Number 5, you want to make sure that there is adequate tissue removal during fulguration. Fulguration, of course, is removing tissue. When there is too much tissue in an area, or perhaps the surgery is related to removing a tumor and the tissue there, you want to make sure that one of the safety outcomes that is projected, planned for, and executed is proper and complete removal of all the tissue, the excessive tissue that has been targeted in that way. So there would be no excessive tissue remaining, but there would be adequate tissue removal during that fulguration. 6, there would be no patient contact with metal surfaces during the procedure. Obviously, if you're passing electricity through them, contact with metal surfaces can lead to grounding and burns and things like this. And so obviously, you need to plan ahead. One of the safety outcomes in electrosurgery is to make sure that there is no contact between the patient and metal surfaces during any of the procedure, but especially during the electrical surgical portion of the procedure. Number 7, you want to make sure that adequate precautions have been taken so that there would be no plume inhalation by the patient. As the electrosurgical unit is in use and you are using the electricity to burn away and remove tissue, of course there will be some plume produced, but you want to make sure that you've set up in such a way that there's adequate ventilation and no danger that the patient themselves will inhale the plume during the procedure. And then finally, number 8, make sure that there's no harm from fire from the electrical surgical unit itself. So I can remove that E there. The electrical surgical unit, of course, does use electricity, and there may be fire hazard, but you've taken adequate safety measures and steps to ensure that one of the outcomes is that there would be no harm from fire to the patient from the electrical surgical unit itself. These are just a sampling of the things you need to keep in mind, but in thinking about electrosurgery and proper safety outcomes, these things need to all be considered and brought in as you're making your plan before the procedure is even initiated. If you'd like to learn more about these things or matters related to electrosurgery, underneath this video, you'll find a link. If you'll click on it, it'll take you to that website where you can find that information. And while you're there, you'll also find a link on that webpage to an ebook that's ready for immediate download.